Beyond Clean offers a creative look into the inner workings of the healthcare industry committed to getting it right every instrument, every time. Join us every week as we explore the hidden world of one of the most important aspects of safe surgical care. And now your hosts, Michael Matthews, Hank Balch, and Justin Poulin.
This week on Beyond Clean, we will be airing the first ever Beyond Clean panel discussion from the 2018 ISHM Annual Conference and Expo entitled Packaging Method Myth-Busting. Our expert panelists for the event included Marcia Frieze from Case Medical, Joe Hannibal from Halyard Health, and Barbara Harmer from Innovative Sterilization Technologies. This is the first installment in a two-part release covering the first half of the panel event, setting the table for the discussion and gathering the panelists' perspectives on myths in the industry and their product modalities. Hank, Mike, I will tell you, there was a lot of anticipation for this event. It was the first time we had ever done it, and in watching the video, I don't look nearly as nervous as I felt getting things kicked off.
That's right, Justin. It was a fantastic opportunity to really bring this confusing topic in front of not only these panel experts who were coming from their perspectives, but also in front of true users and customers in the industry that wanted some good, straight answers. And you're right, the atmosphere and the build-up of the room was electric, and it was really a exciting event to take part in.
Yeah, guys, it is not exaggerating to say that the audience was literally sitting on the edge of their seats, especially when it first began. And I think that just emphasizes how needed this discussion was, that there's so much passion and so much confusion about the various claims that are being made by each of the modalities. So I had my little panic moment about 30 minutes before we started, and after that, the whole thing was just a blur. It was a lot of fun.
It really was. So let's get right into it and share it with the listeners. But a reminder first, you can follow Beyond Clean on Twitter at Beyond Clean Info, Facebook.com/Beyond Clean Podcast, LinkedIn.com/company/Beyond Clean. The Instagram page is Beyond Clean Podcast. And if you have a recommendation for a future guest or topic for the show, or if you want to submit an anonymous picture to be posted on the Instagram page, just send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. We'll be right back. Before we get started with the interview, Beyond Clean had an excellent turnout for our first ever panel discussion at the 2018 ISHM Annual Conference and Expo entitled Packaging Method Myth-Busting, and want to thank the following sponsors for helping make the event possible. Northfield Medical. The new Northfield is focused on hospital operating room device repair management. With millions of medical device repairs a year, they help hospitals make data-empowered decisions on capital purchases, sterile processing procedures, and staffing. They provide surgical and diagnostic equipment repairs that meet OEM standards and consultation on repair trends, true program cost, and measurement baselines that improve outcomes and supply chain efficiencies. Ascendco Health, your data, cleansed completely, organized intelligently, and visualized brilliantly. Ascendco is an emerging health tech company changing the conversation, enabling sterile processing to achieve and sustain peak performance. Take your first step and contact co-founder and CEO Brian Reed. The team at Beyond Clean is very big on data and analytics, and Ascendco is doing some amazing things. I would encourage you to learn more. LogicQuip. LogicQuip provides hospital-grade storage equipment to any department in the hospital and specializing in CAD design, space utilization, and inventory optimization. Ready Set Surgical automates the surgical vendor supply chain. Their cloud-based coordination platform consolidates logistics and communication for all members of the surgical team to ensure that every patient has the right equipment with complete documentation at the right time. And finally, Ultra Clean Systems Inc. Born out of a need to provide healthcare facilities with better, more reliable ultrasonic cleaners for their sterile processing departments, UltraClean has been leading the industry with efficient designs that provide the most throughput while enhancing patient safety. UltraClean also produces Newsflash, a weekly digital newsletter covering a variety of interesting topics relating to sterile processing and infection control, plus new emerging and medical technology, as well as links to ISHM state chapter events and CEU courses. Newsflash also offers a feature article every other week with none other than Hank Balch called The Front Line. Please subscribe to this unique newsletter. Register at ultracleansystems.com under the Newsflash tab. It's free. In recent years, there's been a lot of buzz related to the various sterilization packaging methods now on the market. From disposable blue wrap to traditional rigid containers and the one-tray sterilization system, along with the buzz, we've seen white papers, marketing campaigns, and a fair number of email blasts related to the various options. The purpose of tonight's event is to gather representatives from each of these various packaging methods and engage in a moderated panel discussion in an attempt to answer some of the questions that many sterile processing professionals have on their minds every day. Our expert panelists for this evening include Marcia Frieze from Case Medical. If we can get a round of applause for each panelist. Joe Hannibal from Halyard Health. And Barbara Harmer from Innovative Sterilization Technologies. And now we will begin our discussion entitled Packaging Method Myth Busting. Panelists' answers will be timed. I will hold up cards to make them aware as time is expiring, and the time limit will be noted by the ringing of a bell, at which time the panelists are expected to finish succinctly and allow for the next question. Questions will be posed by hosts of Beyond Clean, Hank Balch and Mike Matthews.
All right, good evening. Our first question is the warm-up question of the event, and also the summary question of the event is, what would you say is the biggest myth in the industry related to packaging methods? And the question is directed first to Marcia.
Good evening, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you for including Case Medical and myself in this discussion. Simply put, the biggest myth is that all containers and packaging materials are the same, that all result in the same outcome and level of safety. However, there are substantial differences when it comes to cost, quality, and outcome. It's up to the user to understand the features and benefits of each packaging method, as well as the ongoing costs and concerns. For example, containers are reusable. Wrap is consumable. There are costs involved with both. The upfront cost of buying a container, and then the ongoing cost for consumables. And then when wrap is considered, it's an ongoing expense, basically without a payback. Consider the cost of the wrap, the tape, the corner protectors, the dust covers, and consider reprocessing issues related to tears and the cost of disposal of wrap, which is not biodegradable. No, all containers and packaging materials are not equally safe. One needs to consider the useful life of the container, how compatible it is with various sterilizers and devices, and certainly how safe it is to use, how it's manufactured, whether components are sold a la carte, the frequency of repair and replacement, and the integrity of the contents for its intended purpose and for later use. One or two container manufacturers challenge the current standards and guidelines for terminal sterilization by claiming that wet loads are safe for later use. While most container manufacturers follow AAMI standards, which limit recommendations for IUSS, formerly called flash sterilization, because of wet loads, others may reinterpret the standards.
And next to Joe.
So, thanks, Hank. I would also like to thank the Beyond Clean team and everyone here. Really an honor to be invited, so thank you. The biggest myth is actually threefold. One, rigid containers seal are not reliable over time. 2, breach identification is near impossible with rigid containers. And 3, the burden of ownership is actually severely understated. The evidence is mounting. There have been not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 unique studies which have all arrived at the same conclusion, and that's that rigid containers do not provide a reliable seal. We have in front of us not only scientific, but also empirical evidence that strongly supports this. Clinical, though, is not the only area where the veil of superiority for containers is misguided, whether it's financial, from an efficiency standpoint, or even environmental. What you see is not what you always get with containers. The reality of the matter is, if you're doing everything the container companies are asking you to do to run a clinically sound container program, it's hardly sustainable, if at all. When we take a deeper look at how container programs should be run, it becomes clear that it's at odds with today's healthcare environment. Healthcare, and the OR specifically, is a world governed by checklists. From checklists to timeouts, it's all in place. And we have to ask, what is the process check to make sure that containers have maintained sterility? From our viewpoint, there is none, and we have to ask, is that okay?
And then to Barb.
Sure. Thank you for having One Tray here tonight, and it's a pleasure to see all of you on a Tuesday evening here. So I'm going to tell you that the myth that I would like to talk about is one word: moisture. And I'd like to take you through, for those of you that know me in the room, know that I have a past history of being a regulator, so I'm a pretty black and white person. And so taking you right through the actual annals of what does it say. And the definition of terminally sterile does not include the word moisture. Multi-society position paper that dates back to 2011 says that terminal sterilization cycles, where instruments are sterilized within containers, wrappers, or primary packaging, designed to maintain the instrument's sterility and allow the devices to be stored for later use. AAMI ST79, 2017, the process by which the product is sterilized within a sterile barrier system that permits storage for use at a later time. And AORN 2018, a process by which the product is sterilized within a sterile barrier that permits storage for use at a later time. And CMS goes on to let you know that it has the exact same definition. We've done extensive literature searches and have found no peer-reviewed articles that show that retained moisture in a packaging system is a pathway for microbes. At best, AORN has the subject listed with limited evidence. AORN's model, which has been used since 2012, considers the quantity and the quality of the collective evidence. Only one category is lower than limited evidence, and that is benefit balances with harms. Interesting to note that these two categories are listed as no research. Translation: no meaningful research has been found in the literature. Also, the rating employs a quality rating of A, B, and C. High for A, B for good, C for low. Combining the numerical score with the letter rating gives the reader or user the strength and quality of the evidence. AORN, again, who started this in 2012, within their recommendations currently in 2018, says a rigid sterilization container should be used, cleaned, inspected, repaired, and maintained according to the manufacturer's written IFU. In 2018, if you look at the AORN recommendation, it gives the AAMI document a 4C, which is the lowest rating that you can get. And so that, again, is in regards to literature search and the evidence of moisture in sterilization for terminal sterilization. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. So we're going to move into the more targeted questions. Question number 1 will be directed to Marcia. After she has 3 minutes to answer the question, there will be a 60-second response from Joe and a 60-second response from Barbara, and then Marcia will be allowed 30 seconds to respond to the responses. Marcia, your question is, what impact do poorly maintained rigid containers, including retention plates, locking mechanisms, and gaskets, have on the ability for the method to serve as a true sterile barrier?
I think that's a relatively easy question. Any device, any piece of equipment, even your own cutlery, if not well maintained, is not going to function well. So yes, there are issues with maintaining sterilization containers, but the goal as a manufacturer is to design and manufacture a product that is easy to use and even easier to maintain. For example, our filter retention plates are completely interchangeable, and our aluminum case and lid are interchangeable too. Furthermore, they're manufactured from an aircraft grade of anodized aluminum, which means if you continue to clean them with a pH-neutral detergent, they'll have a very, very long life cycle, free of repair and non-corrosive for years of continuous use. The condition of the container is as important as the ongoing inspection to maintain its true barrier. We were talking about this a little bit this afternoon, that whether you use wrap or you use container, that an inspection of the materials is absolutely crucial. Containers could have dents or problems with gasket seal or whatever, but wrap can have ongoing problems when it comes to punctures and tears, separation of tape, and so on. So I think it's important to realize, as I said earlier, that not all container and wrap materials are equal, that there are different levels of quality and different levels of concern when it comes to maintenance and repair. So a very important thing is to really, again, to do your due diligence and really get a sense of that the product that you're buying is really of the utmost quality and is going to maintain its useful life. A container that has a compromised seal will affect the barrier, sterile barrier, and compromised contents. That's why built into the design of our container was to have a gasketed knife edge fit between lid and base, to have an offset filter retention plate that's gasketed so there could be no strike through, and also to provide a container that will truly last, that will give the contents the utmost in protection. Because when an instrument set becomes compromised, it places the patient at risk, angers the surgical team, as well as the family or the patient, and it may also affect the entire surgical schedule for the day, not to mention the cost of reprocessing. I'd like to further add that the integrity of a container is also dependent on cleaning it after each use. And I know that sometimes has been an issue, probably from our friends next door, because wrap doesn't have to be cleaned, but then wrap has to be disposed of. Wrap needs to be inspected very carefully, and that Case Medical has a validated process, a very easy process to clean, which we can talk about later.
Thank you. 60-second response from Joe.
Thank you. So the question subtly hints that container failure is driven by human error. The reality is there's a potential intrinsic design flaw with the container itself. ARA study showed a drastic reduction in performance over time, and it also showed that new containers had challenges passing that test. Additionally, visual inspection is simply not enough. The Cabin study showed that 76% of containers which failed actually passed visual inspection. These proof points shift the blame from the human element to the design of the device itself and to the expectations of maintenance and inspection, which frankly are not realistic in today's healthcare environment. The important thing to take away is this. We need to start shifting our mindset from container failures being something we can 100% impact and start realizing that we have a real question to answer around the seal itself.
Thank you. 60 seconds from Barbara.
Maintaining sterility is the name of the game, and it's imperative that the original set of manufacturer specifications must be met. If the tray is out of alignment, has developed some issues with care and handling by the users, then the tray would not be appropriate for use. One tray provides a lifetime warranty on every part of its packaging system. Most hospitals and surgical centers don't send their containers back to the manufacturer. One reason is that it's not free. Two is that they can't afford to be down a tray, taking it out of production. IST has done many studies, independent studies, against our competitors, and we have come out on top with each of those studies.
Thank you. 30-second response from Marcia.
First of all, I think it really comes down to the fact that there are differences in containers, and there's a common factor when it comes to wrap, and the fact is that wraps tear and puncture. The majority of the container surface is basically impenetrable. Our goal, starting as a manufacturer to many of the orthospine companies, made a container that we knew could be transported as a loaner, put into the back of somebody's truck, and basically maintain its integrity over time with multiple handling events.
All right, thank you. This next question goes to Joe first. And the question is, what impact does the stacking of disposable blue wrap have on the integrity of the package itself? And you have 3 minutes.
Thanks, Hank. We should look to address all conditions that endanger the sterility of packaging, whether it be the packaging itself or the storage conditions as well. The reality of the matter is you should not just think it's sterile, you should know it's sterile. And whether you stack or not, we do believe you should follow the mantra, when in doubt, throw it out. We have to ask, what's more damaging, a breach that you're aware of or one that you're not? Given the technology and the scientific data available, ignorance is no longer an excuse there. And this goes back to a couple of our central themes, one being moving the science forward, and two being coming to terms with the limitations of each of the packaging methodologies. When talking about wrap and breaches, it's actually critical to talk about the technology and design itself. So wrap is formed by a process called SMS, which is spun bond, melt blown spun bond. And think of it as a sandwich. You have your outer layers, which provide the strength, which are spun bond. You have the media, which is in the middle, which is melt blown, and that keeps the bugs out. And then I don't know about you guys, if you want to put a treatment on your sandwich, Hank, you might like mayo. Mike, you might like mustard. For SMS, it's actually electret. And electret treatment is embedded in the melt blown, and essentially this charges the melt blown, and it functions as a really strong capture and retain for microbes in the wrap. So the treatment maintains these high capture and retention properties through transport, sterilization, and manipulation. And the combination of the melt-blown layer and electret is really key. That technology yields a 99.9% bacterial filtration efficiency. That's actual, purposeful technology. The entire package is designed to be a filter, which is diametric to a container, where anytime you have a breach anywhere outside of the filter itself, there's absolutely nothing in place to inhibit ingress. Containers are designed and they depend on the assumption that you're keeping a seal, and I think it's plain to see that that's just not happening. Maintenance of package integrity is done and required by the FDA on wrap and yields sterile results after a year. While stacking is certainly not desirable and admittedly hard to avoid, I think it's important to think about two things here. Number one is it's not prohibited, and number two, it's not a fait accompli. In other words, just because you stack doesn't mean it's going to tear. Using good logic and best practices will certainly help mitigate that risk. From a product standpoint, there's some really good options out there. There's a high-performance wrap, which is used by 4 out of the 5 top orthopedic hospitals in the country, and modular storage systems such as Belentra, which eliminate stacking and reduce touch points. What your audience should take away is this. 1, there's actual purposeful technology in wrap that inhibits microbes. 2, there's breach identification with wrap. And 3, frankly, there's better options than containers.
All right. Response first from Barbara for 60 seconds.
So if your organization follows the manufacturer's instructions for use when using wrap, you do know that you should not be stacking during storage. For all the on-site visits that I've done personally throughout my surveying career and currently traveling the country working with a packaging system, conservatively I would estimate that 85% of the wrapped trays are stacked in central, on case carts, in OR suites, and in inner cores. In many respects, we are still operating in the wild, wild west where organizations are using products off-label.
And then to Marcia for 60 seconds.
I'd like to agree and with your assessment as to the fact that packaging is intended to maintain sterility of an item and protect the contents until it is used. There is no question that it is virtually impossible to penetrate the outer surface of a sealed container and very easy to penetrate the surface of wrap. Furthermore, wrap as a filter has some questionable issues with low spots, and some of the BFE testing that I've seen has shown that it has a BFE of 83 to 86%. So I don't know where the 99% comes into play. The reality is that you have to think of a container really like a bank vault. And the way our container with knife edge fit is constructed, it's a very, very tight seal with clamping latches, offset filter retention plate and holes, so it's virtually impenetrable. I would suggest that anybody who, unfortunately, you can't come to a booth tomorrow, but if you see our container, just try to puncture through the filter. Impossible.
All right, and then Joe, 30 seconds. Joe.
I thought you were going to give me an extra 30 seconds.
Yeah, no free time.
Okay. So I just want to address, Barbara, thank you for the comments. Stacking is not prohibited, actually. With the newest rendition of AAMI ST79, it actually points back to the manufacturer IFU as they're tending to do more and more. In our IFU, we've actually updated it to state, to give a precaution around stacking, to really give some guidance that it's not a automatic or mandatory tear. So just wanted to address that first, and to address Marcia in terms of the seals of containers. There's 4 studies out there that suggest otherwise.
Thank you, panelists. Next question will be directed to Barbara. Barbara, what is the tangible difference between an IUSS cycle and a one-tray cycle if water remains inside the container? You have 3 minutes.
Sure. Tangible difference, comparing a one-tray cycle to an IUSS cycle is as similar to comparing an apple and a watermelon. They both have seeds. Let me start off by defining an IUSS cycle. An IUSS cycle is one where the sterilization method that involves the shortest possible time between a sterilized item's removal from the sterilizer and its aseptic transfer to the sterile field. Key concept is that IUSS packaging system is not stored for future use, nor held from one case to another. We've already determined that the industry definition of terminal sterilization permits storage for use at a later time. The difference between IUSS and terminal is one word: storage. One tray was cleared by the FDA in its 510K with a claim for storage. One tray has always been a terminal tray by industry's definition. One tray doesn't have a specific cycle. That's a misnomer. Users should follow the sterility parameters of the medical device IFU: time, temperature, and pressure. The advancement that one tray has over all, and I repeat, all terminal packaging systems, is that we have the only FDA clearance with 0 dry time and 0 cool time. Dry time has no relevance to achieving 10 to the -6 sterility assurance level. Dry time is used to assist in post-sterilization sterility maintenance. Can anybody in this room be able to verify that the items in the packaging systems are sterile, with or without water, or that during storage the contents maintained their sterility? The answer is no. There have been great strides recently in the development of testing materials for cleaning, but all we know about the sterility of the tray is that a Type 5 integrator has reached the acceptable level on the strip. With blue wrap, it's pretty easy to tell because it's visual. There's a hole in the wrapper. But what about rigid container systems? The lid-to-base interface is as important to the sterility of the inner contents as is whether there are breaks in the integrity of the wrap.
Thank you. Now there'll be time for a 60-second response from Marcia.
I hope we can get it all in 60 seconds. First of all, there is absolutely no difference between a one-tray cycle and IUSS. And the 510K from one tray clearly states just-in-time rapid sterilization, formerly called flash. So I think it's important that people go online, look at our FDA 510K claims, look at those from one tray. The other part, too, is all of us as medical device manufacturers or containment device manufacturers must follow ANSI/AAMI SC77. Clearly, the design of containment devices intended for use in steam sterilization shall provide for adequate drying of contents and commonly available hospital sterilization cycles. Rationale for a terminal sterilization process, there should be no visible moisture present in or on containment devices following any sterilization process.
Thank you. 60-second response from Joe.
Thank you. So the key message here is clear. I think the sterilization community is hardly united on whether this is appropriate. And let's take a step back and make sure this is a responsible advancement of technology, science, and most importantly, patient care. As Marcia mentioned, Amy has long stated any package that appears wet should be reprocessed. AORN and CDC have similar stances. There should be no visible moisture because, as we know, moisture is a pathway for bacteria. And there's even evidence that's published that supports with a high level of spores, steam sterilization efficacy is reduced. More worrisome, though, is the fact that the new technology has not addressed the core fundamental issue of a reliable seal over time. And this is important because as one tray continues to market longer and longer shelf lives, the math doesn't add up. Moisture plus time plus a non-reliable seal is a very concerning equation. The bottom line is the scientific community is hardly aligned as to whether wet water in a package is okay.
So let me just ask the question, when do you believe one 510K and you don't believe another? I think all of us in this room know that the FDA is the only agency in the United States that clears packaging systems and medical devices. One tray was cleared in 2006. And happy to tell you that I was one of the authors of the white paper that took Flash and turned it into IUSS. Immediate use steam sterilization did not exist as a concept in 2006.
All right. Thank you, panelists.
All right, that was the first installment in the two-part release covering the first half of our Beyond Clean panel discussion event from the 2018 ISHM Annual Conference and Expo entitled Packaging Method Myth Busting. I could tell you guys we're only halfway through, but if you were able to see the audience, you'd know they really were all on the edge of their seat and things were just beginning to heat up before we come back and do segment 2. That'll be the next episode because then we get into rapid fire questioning.
Absolutely, Justin. There's already been a ton of great information packed into this episode. Be sure and tune in for the next one where there's even more.
I know, guys, being live at this event, you felt the seconds flying by, and yet you also felt this content coming at you like a fire hose. I'm excited that we're able to share it in this kind of format that gives everyone the opportunity in the comfort of their car, home, or resident decontam area, and give everyone the opportunity to tune in and really think about the ideas and perspectives that we discussed at this event.
All right, that's going to do it for this week's show. As a reminder, you can help support Beyond Clean by subscribing on iTunes and Stitcher. We'd certainly appreciate a rating and a review. Your feedback is really important to the success of the show. And if you have any topics that you'd like us to cover, or if you've got a recommendation for a future guest, or you would like to share a picture anonymously on our Instagram page, just send an email to info@beyondclean.net. Join us next week when we have the second in the two-part series from the 2018 ISHM Annual Conference and Expo for the Beyond Clean panel discussion event, Packaging Method Myth Busting. On behalf of Hank, Mike, and myself, thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond Clean.